Hello YouTube, welcome to my stream of consciousness video part 2. So, as I was saying, you have this gradual emergence of and escalation of control from the beginning of civilization to the present day. And it hasn't followed a complete linear path. Obviously, there have been periods that have actually been far more, you could argue that there have been periods in history that have been far more horrific in terms of their degree of control than the current world, but you could also argue in some respects there is no parallel to the current destructiveness and pathological desire to control that the elites in our current society exhibit. So essentially what you have is initially the control of humans by humans. That began with the division of labor, agriculture, the incipient state, which was the shamans, and then the priest class and religion, institutionalized religion, which morphed into the state apparatus ultimately. And so then you have the control. So you have the domestication of humans. You have the denial of their self-sufficiency, and you have the in essence ownership, either in a literal sense or at the time in a literal sense. And then you have this desire to control nature, which cannot be separated from this desire for humans to control other humans. And we're reaching the apotheosis of the desire of humans to control nature. And we see this by the fact that 90% plus of the world's old growth forests are gone. You see this by the fact that 30 to 100 species are going extinct every single day. You see this by the fact that the vast majority of streams and large water bodies in the U.S. are polluted with carcinogens. You see this by the first complete, in relative terms, completely sustainable hunter-gatherer societies becoming agricultural societies. And agriculture, if you don't know this, renders the land uninhabitable, because in order to render a plot of land suitable for agriculture, you have to kill everything on the land that was previously growing on the land, and then you have to render the soil, over an extended period of time. Agriculture will render the soil increasingly less nutritious to the point where it is no longer usable. So agriculture is an inherently unsustainable practice, in addition to it being a practice that leads to surpluses, which lead to populations overshooting their carrying capacity, and which lead to the need to defend the land, which lead to armies and control. Someone takes control of the food that is yielded from the agricultural production, and that leads to a multi-tiered society as opposed to a society where everyone has access to food, etc. So it's an altogether bad practice. And then you see within the past 80 years turning agriculture, a much more decentralized form of agriculture and farming, into a society in which very few people, at least in the U.S., farm now. I believe it's gone in the past 40 years alone from 30% of people being farmers to 3%. Don't quote me on that. It may not be an entirely accurate statistic, but it's something to that effect. And so what you have is the increasing concentration of the means of food production in the hands of a few people, which allows for greater control. It allows for it necessitates more people working 9 to 5, more people having bosses, etc. And then you have the emergence of companies like Monsanto, which have these monocrops that are unhealthy, and it allows them to exploit workers, and is even more detrimental to the land base. And it diminishes biodiversity, which is a beneficial facet facet of any ecosystem that allows it to continue to thrive and allows human populations to continue to thrive. And then the efficiency of these monocrops also tie into the carrying capacity and our ability to temporarily pretend that we can ignore the natural laws and have Monsanto in some country halfway around the world producing genetically modified crops that are feeding people in the first world. Yeah, so we have this trajectory of control that has led to the virtual, I don't want to say virtual complete poisoning of the natural environment, but the extensive, to say the absolute least, poisoning of the natural environment. It has led to this desire to genetically alter human beings, genetic engineering, which I fear will lead to parents deciding precisely what traits their kids have, which is already in the works, already more than theoretically possible. I believe there have been trials in that effect, in that regard, in that area. And then we have things like the TSA wanting to molest us before we fly. We have things like the police, not allowing people to film in memorials. We have this. In essence, we have a society that's been disconnected from its natural environment. We have a society that's been disconnected from one another. We have been disconnected from not only our environment and our fellow non-humans, but from one another, from our fellow human beings. And as a consequence, we have this desire to control other human beings to the point where we're attempting to control our very genetics. So, it seems insane to me that people would want to have this degree of power over one another, because I don't have that desire. I guess I haven't been rendered sufficiently sick by this society that I have this desire to control every facet of people's lives, that they have that causes me to want to require people to get licenses and permits for everything they do, whether it be drive a car, whether it be now in some cases ride your bicycle, whether it be I don't know, I guess I just don't see other people as something to exploit and dehumanize. I guess I just don't see the natural environment as something to systematically decimate. Because I'd rather live in a healthy community, and everyone wants to live in a healthy community. I just think the people that control our society are so sick and have been so damaged by actions of previous elites, or by their own actions, or by individual circumstances, that any spontaneity, any humanness, any display of innate beauty or control over one's own life is viewed as a threat to them, because subconsciously they remember that they used to be a human being. Believe it or not, Janet Napolitano used to be a human being. Before she started ordering TSA employees to molest 5-year-old kids, she was a human being at some point in her life. Now, it is my more than speculation, albeit not scientifically grounded, assertion that she is terrified of people reminding her of her former humanity that she has had stolen from her or taken from herself. And as such, she wants to crush this humanity in other people. We have, in essence, a bunch of bullies. A bunch of people who have been bullied and who are perpetuating the cycle of bullying. We have people that are so damaged that they want to damage other people, so that they can pretend that they're not, so that they can create a society in which everyone's as damaged as they are, so that they can consider themselves the norm. So they don't have to look at themselves in the mirror and say, "Wow, I'm a really damaged person. I wish I were happy." To the contrary, they can say, "I'm just like everyone else," because by the time they've damaged everyone else to the extent that they've been damaged, they're no longer uniquely damaged. And that's a terrifying thing. And I think it's only going to perpetuate as we see the environment further destroyed and the economy further collapse to the point where, more individuals are plunged into poverty, and, people are going to be so damaged that they feel the need to damage and control others, and the elites are obviously going to take advantage of this situation to whatever extent they can to cling on to the existing social order. Now, it is my hope that the elites don't have sufficient resources to outlast the collapse of industrial civilization, and of the global economy. Because the indigenous people really are the ones that have a best shot when all of this collapses, because they still are intimately in tune with their natural environment and haven't been rendered as docile and dependent on the indigenous people are not dependent upon industrial civilization. The few remaining indigenous tribes in our world are not dependent on this centralized form of power. And so the elites have far more resources than the rest of us, but it is my hope that they will be unable to outlast the collapse, because if they do, they're just going to be able to control, they're just going to continue to attempt to control everything and attempt to eradicate the remaining indigenous communities in our world. So I'm going to end this video here, YouTube. Thanks for listening to my convoluted and perhaps not entirely eloquent rant here. Ramble, I suppose, would be a better way to put it. I suppose I've repeated things in previous videos that I've said. I attempted to go into a bit more detail on these issues, but I hope that I did that adequately and didn't just end up repeating myself endlessly or repeating things I've stated in previous videos. But in any case, it is what it is. Thanks for listening. Question why you're listening to a YouTube video rather than getting involved with your local anti-establishment resistance movements. And question what it says about societal disconnection and atomization, question what it says about you as an individual, and question how you can change that. And go for a walk outside right now, go prowl in a forest, go commune with some wild animals, do something a little more in touch with your innate humanness than succumbing to this virtual reality that is the internet and abstracting yourself from your own senses and from genuine connection to the real physical world around you. And on that note, I will talk to you all. I will talk to you all through this fucking computer screen at a later date, unless I decide to abandon technology entirely and go live in the wilderness. Thanks for listening.